other services.
Very well, time now for that discussion that I promised you at the start of the show. Let's now have that discussion about food security and how the Jubilee government has fared with it. Joining me now is Mr. Okisegere Ojapat. Man, you have a mouthful name. The CEO of Fresh Produce Consortium of Kenya. Good to see you, sir.
Morning.
Let's begin by talking about the drought situation in the country and for a government that had a big promissory card on agriculture, which of course cascades down to food security. Where did we miss it? Because 8 counties are in the red as we speak, and there's just a lot of Kenyans, 4 million Kenyans who are actually going hungry. Where did we miss it as a government?
I will not pretend and purport to speak for and on behalf of government, but I'll speak as a Kenyan and a stakeholder in this industry. One, I must admit that sometimes we are very good at talking, but our implementation is just a mess.
Okay.
And for me, it's just people who are not serious. People who are meant to have fixed the infrastructure that allows us to fix the food security. We're not serious in following what we need to do. We must admit that our population is growing. We know that climate change is here. We also receive erratic rains, but a lot of rains in this case. And the example is the amount of rain we get per season, or even just per downpour. That rain, that water ends up in Indian Ocean, as if we have a contract to supply Indian Ocean with water that God has given us. And we have done almost nothing when it comes to saving water, because the world over, what people do is you harvest water at a season when we have water, and we use that water for irrigated agriculture. So we cannot be sustainable if we rely on rain-fed agriculture, and we know how erratic our rains have become. They either have too much or too little. It either comes on time, either late or early in the season. This is no longer the years we used to predict that it will start on 15th of March and it will end up in this day. That has not happened. So what we need to do is very clear. The government has not done what they needed to do in terms of encouraging the infrastructural structure development and allowed the private sector to take the position of running it. An example is the infrastructure for Gulano Gulalu and all the irrigation schemes that the government had promised to revive. It's the business of the government to have revived them and handed them over to private sector to run the business. Because government is not in the business of doing business, is in the business of facilitating business.
Sure.
So that did not happen. And if it happened, then it has happened in a very little scale that then has made it impossible for us to produce sufficiently. Secondly, is that our cost of production is extremely expensive, and therefore those who are supposed to be in food production have moved and shifted their investment onto something else. I rather trade than produce when I know I'm going to make losses, and the cost of production in this region is too expensive. So government failed completely in lowering the cost of inputs and in encouraging the private sector uptake for producing the food that we require. For that reason, our population that is high and our production that's going low has obviously given us a gap to fill in. And ordinarily, that gap then is filled by imports that are not sustainable. So that's where we went wrong.
Allow me to start you off on that point where you left, on the cost of farm inputs, because we are seeing a lot of subsidies as we speak right now. And of course, we've been seeing these issues about imports and farm inputs and all of these things, both for factors of production or farm inputs, fertilizers in this case, and then also the issues to do with maize imports. Of course, we've been having trouble with our neighbors all the time. There's always a trade tariff that's always ban on imports and all those kind of things. Are these subsidy programs sustainable? Because we are seeing fertilizer, which came out earlier on in the year, and now we are seeing maize subsidies. Talk to us about that.
Number one, subsidies all over the world are not sustainable.
Why so?
Why they're not sustainable is, look at what has happened in Kenya. The subsidies has come a certain period. And then I just want to also say here, who said subsidies are meant for maize? Because in this country, we seem to think maize is food and food is maize, which is wrong. And then I see subsidies coming for maize. What happens to the subsidies with beans? What happens with peas? What happens with cassava? What happens with sorghum? What happens with sorghum? Millet. What happens with bananas? What happens with potatoes? Why do we think food is maize and maize is food? We just need to exit this space. If we are not able to produce maize, can people diversify their menu? Go to cassava, millet, potatoes, bananas, and anything else, and stop looking at subsidies for maize than subsidies for farmers. Because when you subsidize maize farmers, what do you do with the beans farmer?
Sure.
What do you do with the rice farmer? What do you do with the potato farmer? Who said subsidies must go to maize and that maize is food and food is maize? That is wrong. Secondly, is that when you talk about subsidies, it's short-lived. It's short-lived, so it comes for a season. I will want a situation where government then goes down and scraps what we call taxes that are associated with farm inputs. Look at the horticulture industry where I sit in. I sit in the horticulture industry every day, and our cost of production is getting higher by day, and people are getting discouraged in growing exportable products that we are supposed to be exporting to earn this country more revenue because the cost of production is just too high, and the market on the other side cannot pay beyond certain price of cost, because the other parts of the world are supplying affordable products to the same market, good quality, and here we are struggling with it. So the neighborhood, non-neighborhood, it's just the structure within the Ministry of Agriculture must sit together, and Treasury must be called to order to get to know that you do not increase taxes on agro inputs pretending you're going to collect more revenue. You need to lower down the cost of tax, or you just remove taxes and encourage many people to get into production. When you have more people producing, you have more produce, you have enough food, the prices for food will come down, and that is more sustainable because there are many people who are producing than at the moment where you have very few people producing, and you also want to tax the same people. I mean, look at fertilizer. Today, fertilizer is at 6,000, 7,000 shillings, up from subsidy of 2,500. Now, if we have to continue bailing, it's not sustainable because government will not have sufficient resources. Because where are those resources coming? It means somebody has to be taxed elsewhere or undercut elsewhere to be able to sustain this. And yet, you can choose when to have the next shirt, to buy the next shirt, or the next shoe, or the next tie, but you can never choose when to eat. So where we need to put our priority is our priorities is to ensure that the cost of production in this country comes down. Once that is done, we will compete and we'll have no war with our neighborhood.
I hear you. Time is not on our side. Allow me to ask a last question here. We saw agriculture contract in the economic survey of 2022. 2% could be a small figure, but it's huge. The impact will be felt definitely in the subsequent years. What are some of the new opportunities that perhaps farmers can consider now that things like maize are not sustainable, rain-fed agriculture is also not really sustainable in the long run, and such kind of things? Talk to us about the new opportunities of this that you see.
First of all, let's agree that not all of us are farmers. And this thing of Kenyans thinking the only thing you can do is go to the farm. Farming is a science. And we must respect scientists and respect agriculturists. And respect extension services. So for me, first, we need to fix the extension services in this country urgently. The second thing we need to do here is look at what are we producing. If producing maize is not sustainable, let's look at other horticulture products that can be able to get ready within a short period of time. They are high value. We are able to get revenue. Once we have the revenue, then we can buy the maize for those who want to eat maize. And unfortunately for me, it's a good thing because I'm not a ugali person.
You told me that earlier today.
So ugali, I mean, I keep asking people who say the ugali is the only thing that supplies you nutrients. Eat your potatoes, your cassavas, your millet, your groundnuts, and everything else that you can take, and forget this thing is. So once we are able to fix that in terms of getting those things sorted, then we will be able to say we are in business. But at the moment, as it is, I can tell you for free, we have failed as far as agriculture is. But so the opportunity here is for scientists, it's for science to be given room. Innovation. Look at the plant protection products. Look at hybrid, right seed. Look at right technologies. Look at irrigated agriculture. That is the opportunity we have because we have the land. If we are able to get into irrigation, if we are able to get into high value crops, then we are able to say we'll be in some business.
Fair enough. In one word, do you ever see Kenya changing its feeding patterns, consumption patterns?
It will take time. we are still bound in cultural things that we think things have to happen. But I can tell you for sure, with the new generation, it's about availability of the nutrients and not maize. So
Right.
I just want to encourage everyone, perhaps on the tail end, I just want to let Kenyans know that there's hope.
There's hope, yeah.
And for those who are in horticulture, please, it's time for us to get to the farms. The market is opening up. The weather patterns in Europe are changing and are in favor of us. So let people go into the farms. Let us do a proper production. We have market out there and we have market locally.
Fair enough. Many thanks. We'll be speaking to the CEO of Fresh Produce Consortium of Kenya, that is Mr. Okisegere Ojapat. I'm glad I got the name right this time. And that's why we end it right here on Business Cafe. We'll be having more of these discussions across the week, and of course, just unpacking to you what the Jubilee administration has been able to achieve in terms of its economic legacy. I'm Brian Jodotieno. Purity Museo is up next with News Center. Enjoy the rest of your viewing.